Hi, welcome back, or welcome to my first video. And if anybody tells you that I uploaded any videos before this, they're a liar, don't listen to them, and don't check. So to start off, I actually wrote this video like a year ago, and I just didn't touch it. I don't really know why I didn't touch it. I think that I just got like busy with school or whatever, but I wrote a full script, made a full like slideshow for it, and I just never made the video. And I've got some time now, got a little bit more freedom, and I figured, hey, you know, why not get back into it? On this channel, I'm going to be doing some movie reviews like this one, and I also maybe want to do some gaming stuff, so if you want to stick around for that, you can. I highly doubt anybody's watching this, but this is for my own entertainment, as well as anybody who decides they want to indulge in some cringe for a minute. So, as you probably saw by the title, today we are reviewing a movie called 500 Days of Summer. And yes, while I did write this script and make the slideshow for this video like a year ago, I still am obsessed with this movie. I still love this movie. I have so many edits saved, so we have to talk about it. I'm still getting used to like this whole setup. So if I'm like moving a lot, if I stutter a little bit, I'm just trying to like figure this all out. Haven't filmed anything like this in a really long time, but we're gonna get through it. So this is future me here editing. I wanna just apologize for the fact that the sound quality is really terrible. I woke up in a panic last night realizing that I recorded this entire video, one, without using my microphone, and two, also with my fan on in the background. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna re-record this entire video just because the audio kind of sucks. Sorry about that. So to start off, I created a little slideshow to just help me visualize, help you guys visualize everything that I'm talking about. I love making slideshows. I want to make this kind of like my thing when I do movie reviews and reviews of anything else, just to make a little Canva slideshow about it. It's always been my thing. I love building them. I think this one's really pretty. Usually I'll do a different structure for movie reviews. I want to make like a set structure that I use for all my slideshows, but because I made this slideshow so long ago and I only edited it a little bit, I'm just gonna say that this will just be the structure for this one video, and then later movie reviews I'll have a set structure that I'll use for, you know, every single one. I also have a script over here, because if I did not write a script, it would just be incoherently yapping for like an hour. So, if you see me looking over here, that is what I'm looking at. So like the title suggested, 500 Days of Summer is my favorite horror movie. No, it's not actually a horror movie. If for some reason you're living under a rock and you haven't seen the meme, is it a meme? I don't know. Maybe I'm living under a rock. But no, it's not actually a horror movie. It's a joke because, as you'll come to find out, it is not the happiest movie. It's definitely not a romance, to make that very clear in the beginning.
This is a story of boy meets girl, but you should know up front, this is not a love story.
So what I'm going to be talking about and what I'm going to be using to basically rate this movie are three different categories or parts. We're going to be talking about the plot, discussing every part of the plot. We're going to be talking about the editing and story structure, and we're going to be talking about the characters. I just want to give a big warning right now. This video will contain spoilers. I will not be holding back. We will be going through every important plot point. So if you don't want it spoiled for you, then I suggest either don't watch this video or go watch the movie first and watch it later. I would prefer the second one. So let's jump straight into it with going into part one, plot. So I'm going to break this up by all three separate acts. So let's start with Act 1. In Act 1, the main character, Tom, is a huge believer in true love. That's made clear immediately. Like, if you ever seen How I Met Your Mother, he's like Ted. Like, just obsessed with it, in love with the idea, just wants it to happen so bad. Before we get any further into this, I need to make it clear that I am a Tom, and I will be bagging a little bit on Summer. If you've already seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you'll find out who Summer is. Look, listen. I don't judge you if you're a Summer, okay? I don't judge you. I get it. I understand you. You're valid. Okay, so Tom, obsessed with romance, and he develops an office crush on this girl, Summer, who is the new assistant to his boss. So after a few weeks of him pining for her, they meet at a work event. Again, it's been a minute since I've written this script, so there might be some gaps in my memory, but I believe they were at like a karaoke bar, and they ended up discussing a lot of things, including the idea of being in a relationship. And Summer makes it very clear to Tom that she is not interested in a relationship. She's not interested in being in love. She doesn't even believe in love. And of course, Tom, the hopeless romantic, is like, what the fuck do you mean you don't believe in love? Like, come on. Hello? And he obviously has like a big crush on her, so this is very upsetting to him. But despite all these things, they end up getting together, they end up hooking up, and they start hooking up and they start dating, but like without the label. And of course Tom is like head over heels for her. Literally like in love with her. But Summer is kind of confusing because she made it clear that she didn't want to be with him in the beginning. But then they started having this kind of relationship that was a lot more than casual. And it really confuses Tom. It really confuses Tom because he knows what she said and he understands what she said. I understand is he doesn't understand it. He knows what she said. But all the things they're doing, like they're, getting a little, having a little bit of, not a word that I can say on here. I actually don't know. I should probably read into that a little bit more. They start being very coupley, and they're doing a lot of things, and, it's giving Tom a lot of mixed messages, because, in my personal opinion, you can be very clear. You can say something, but your actions speak differently, and I think this is very much how Tom feels. Like, he heard her when she said she wasn't interested in a relationship, but they are basically in a relationship, but she doesn't want one. It's very confusing for him. But for her, she's not even really sure if she likes him. Like, they're on very different planes. You could say that the relationship is kind of one-sided. I think it can be more described as, like, Tom is very in love with her, and Summer's not really sure if she is really interested. Like, most, she kind of feels like it might be, like, a friends with benefits thing. That's kind of where she's at. They're basically just dating, but she refuses to call him her boyfriend. Anyway, Act 1's pretty simple. It's basically just them meeting, Tom falling in love, them hooking up, Summer not being sure, where she's at. So Act 2 is where things start to get really, really interesting, because at first in Act 1, the arrangement is going, like, kind of okay. Like, there's obviously signs that things clearly aren't gonna turn out well for either of them, but, I mean, they're kind of just like, fuck it, whatever, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. They both, in their own separate ways, start having really serious doubts about what's going on. Summer isn't convinced that she actually even has feelings for him, and Tom is starting to feel the same way, because they're having a lot of interactions where it seems like Summer just isn't really happy being with him, and he doesn't really understand why. So it's basically like this vicious cycle, where Tom keeps trying to get Summer to admit that she's interested in him, but Summer just keeps pushing him away. So this pretty big moment happens, which is a big turning point in the relationship, where they're at a bar and this guy hits on Summer. And you can kind of tell that Summer's uncomfortable, but she's not straight up saying, like, hey, I have a boyfriend. And because of this, Tom decides he needs to step in, and he ends up, beating up this guy because he was, making Summer uncomfortable. And this becomes a whole point of contention because obviously Summer's like, dude, you're not my boyfriend, why would you do that? And Tom's like, because I fucking am. We might not have that label, but, we're clearly doing something here, so why wouldn't I defend you or defend myself? Because he's hitting on somebody that I'm in love with. So Summer basically says, why would you do that? We're just friends. And Tom is like, fuck this, I'm out. And it kind of seems like Summer's coming around for a minute, but it still is just pretty clear that she's just unhappy with him. And honestly, either of them should have broken it off at this point. I think Tom should have had enough self-respect to be like, hey, if you're not actually interested in me, we need to cut this off. I'm not just gonna fuck you for fun. And Summer should have been like, I think that this is really hurting this guy, and this is clearly not what I want, so, we're ending this. I think one of them should have ended it at this point. So, it finally comes to a head when they argue for the final time. They argue for the final time because they've been dating for a minute, and Summer brings up the fact, not dating, sorry. They've been doing their thing for a minute, and Summer's like, we're arguing all the time, we're clearly not happy, and Tom's like, are you kidding me? Are you not happy? And she's like, obviously not. And she's like, okay, we just need to end this because I'm not doing this. We're not doing this. This isn't doing good. And Tom is obviously devastated. Summer does not seem to care that much. Honestly, not out of character for her because she didn't think it was anything big in the beginning. She kind of just tries to move on and even tells him that he's still her best friend, which, ow, oh my god, ow. And obviously he's really upset, and after this all happened, Summer just kind of disappears, like, out of thin air. Like, she doesn't come back to work, nobody really knows where she went, people just say that she quit, and Tom is like, what the fuck? Like, he's obviously devastated by this. So, I don't really know exactly how much time goes by. The timeline in this movie is a little confusing. We'll get into why that is when I get into the editing and story structure part of it. So, however many months later, Tom and Summer run back into each other. And I think they run back into each other because they're going to a friend's wedding. And they basically spend the entire night flirting. Like, they're dancing, being really flirty with each other. And Tom is like, okay, like, here we go. Like, things are, being more clear. He thinks that this all is more clear, and she's super into him, blah, blah, blah. So, during this whole night of flirting, she ends up inviting him to a party the next day, and of course, in his brain, he's like, oh, yes, hell yes, things are happening, things are gonna happen, because he spent the whole night flirting, blah, blah, blah. So, he goes to this party, and I'll get a little bit more into this whole party scene because it's actually really interesting. They do a whole thing where they cut between his expectations of how the night would go and the actual reality of how it went. So Tom thinks that things are going to happen at this party based off of what happened the night before. But when he gets there, it's very, very disappointing for him, and she kind of ends up just ignoring him the whole night, and basically not talking to him, and he hangs out at this party alone, and big plot twist right here, he sees her showing off an engagement ring to everybody, and he's like, actually, what the fuck? I'm like, actually, what the fuck? I'm like, huh? Like, since when were you, like, I didn't think you, hello? So we bring ourselves into Act 3, and right after the party, Tom is feeling betrayed. He feels sad and awful, and he's basically, like, at rock bottom at this point. He goes through the typical stages of grief and losing that relationship with Summer, but I think the most important thing to note here is that he loses his faith in relationships and love in general, which I think is a very substantial turnaround in his character, a very substantial point in his character development, because what we know about Tom, the most important character trait is that he is a hopeless romantic. He wants that love. He wants that love, and he wants it from Summer. And I think him losing his faith in love is incredibly important to his character growth and change, and man has lost all hope. So we get a lot of, like, scenes of him just grieving this relationship, him being so devastated by what's happened, just being heartbroken. He has a really touching scene with his little sister. She asks him to look back at all the moments he thought that he knew Summer was his soulmate, and to recognize that she was never his soulmate to begin with. That she was never the person that he was meant to be with. And I think this is a really important moment in the film because it shows not only that Tom is coming around to the idea that he can learn to love again after Summer, but it also makes the audience aware that Tom was in part a unreliable narrator, because the things that he remembers in his head as happy or fond memories are not actually those things. If we go back and look at those scenes, and in this montage we see these events he's having with Summer, and we see a lot more clearly that she's not interested in him. So for the final time, Summer and Tom run back into each other at a park that they had one of their dates at. I can't remember if it was the first date or just one of the dates, but basically Tom confronts Summer and is like, what happened? Like, what's going on? And she reveals to everybody that she is now married to the guy that she was engaged to. And Tom looks at her and is just like, how? Like, how are you with this guy? You didn't want a relationship. That's the whole reason we ended our thing that we had, but you ended up marrying this guy. And she gives him a very, and I actually respect her a lot for this, because she gives him a hard truth that he needed to hear, and she tells him that she is so sure of everything with him that she was never sure of with Tom. It's so simple that her and Tom were never meant to be together. They were never going to be compatible, and they were never perfect for each other. And she tells him the story of how she met her husband and how much more clear things were for her with him than they were with Tom. And she tells him, she looks him in the face, and he needed this, and she says, this is not the end of the world. You will find another girl. This is not the end of the world. Like, you're going to be okay. We were not meant to be together. and you need to go on and live your life. But I really respect Summer for this because she's right. She's right, he needs to get off his ass and he needs to move on. So in this conversation, Tom finally gets his closure. He now knows that it wasn't anything that he did wrong, and it wasn't anything that Summer did wrong. They just weren't meant to be together. This is another important moment because this is where Tom gains his faith and love in relationships back. Because Summer, in this whole monologue that she gives him, I'm not really sure if it's a monologue or more of a conversation, I don't really remember, but she tells him that the one most important thing she drills into his brain, other than obviously they were meant to be together, is that he was right about romance, and he was right about love, and she needed to find somebody else to see that he was right. And this kind of turns his whole character arc back into like this whole 180, 360, it circles all back to the beginning, where has faith and love and relationships, and is ready to move on. And he has this really funny moment where he goes in for this job interview, and he meets this girl, and he's like, you know what, I'm ready to move on, I'm ready to go be with somebody else. And he meets this girl, and she says her name is Autumn, and he's a little bit like, interesting, and he has a little fourth wall break for a second, and it's really good. Okay, so for each section, I'll be doing a rating at the end, and then I'll be doing an ending conclusion, but we'll get there. So for the plot, I want to rate the plot a 9 out of 10. I just feel like the plot is so real and relatable. It's very emotional, and it's executed extremely well. It really brings a sense of uniqueness to the screen, and it just is something really, really special. Anyway, we are finally on to part 2, editing and story structure. When I eventually create this like template I want to do for movie reviews and stuff, I will generally include cinematography instead of editing and story structure. But I feel like for this movie, it's really, really important to talk about the editing and story structure. So something different that this movie does is they do establishing a timeline very differently. If you've seen other movies like Memento, for example, the idea of mixing up a timeline isn't necessarily new, but I think 500 Days of Summer does it in a very interesting way where they jump between the times, because obviously it is set with a specific time period, 500 days, but it jumps throughout that. So obviously from the title, the movie its timeline is 500 days. But it jumps throughout those 500 days. So at the beginning of the movie, you already have a scene where they're broken up. Which, normally for a movie, you wouldn't want to give that type of thing away. But for this movie, they're trying to make it really clear that this is not a romantic movie. This is not a romance, okay? So they put that scene at the beginning. And then you go through and you like see how they got to dating. And then you might jump to when they're broken up. And then you might come back. And there's a lot of back and forth, which sometimes can be confusing. But I think for this movie, it really works. By giving us the order of events in a different way, it gives us a unique perspective on what's happening in the story. And it also more intensifies the fact that Tom is an unreliable narrator. There are scenes that we don't even see from their relationship until they're broken up and until Tom is dealing with their breakup. So there are things that they are hiding from us specifically to give us a certain perception of who Tom and Summer are, which I think is a really good tool to use when you're building that type of narrative where not everything is supposed to be revealed right away. And I think when you watch this movie, you might assume that they give everything away at the beginning because they already told you that they're broken up by the beginning, so how are you supposed to get invested in the story? And they kind of hit you with that, well, there's a lot more nuance to it than they're just broken up. There's a lot more to the story. So it kind of gives you this incentive to sit there and really try to decipher like the deeper meaning of what's going on and what's really happening. And I think that's a really good tool to keep you engaged in the movie. I think if the plot was totally linear, it would still be an interesting movie, but it wouldn't have that certain like uniqueness that draws you into what's going on in the story. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but there is this scene, what I like to call expectations versus reality. And what happens in this scene is, it's the scene where after they flirt and meet up at the wedding, and Summer invites him to the party the next day. I mentioned that there's a scene where they show Tom's expectations of how the party will go, and the actual reality of what happens. show and talk about this scene because it gives you a really good perspective on how unique the editing truly is for this movie and what sets it apart from so many other things. And I think it's a perfect commentary, and it's a perfect way to show that when you are truly so deeply in love with someone, you create this certain fantasy in your head of how it's supposed to go. And like I've mentioned 1,000 times throughout this video, I've been there personally, and I know how these fantasies of what you think is going to happen can become so real in your head. Even if they haven't happened or haven't happened yet, they can become so real in your head that when they prove to be untrue or when they prove to be just fantasies, it is more hurtful than anything else. This is also another important point in the movie because it is the final wake-up call that tells Tom that Summer is not interested in him. And I think even after they broke up, Tom still had this hope driving him, telling him that they will be together one day. And I think that this whole expectations versus reality perfectly shows the shift and change from what Tom has been fantasizing about being completely and totally broken by his reality. We witness his inner conflict as he goes into this scene, wanting something so desperately, but being forced to face the fact that it truly is just something he wants and it's not a reality. So I went ahead and gave the editing and story structure an 8 out of 10. While I still love it, and while I love that they did such unique things like the expectations versus reality, and even the way that they skip through time, they do a very specific thing showing that. I think it is very great at points, but overall it's not super interesting. They don't do a lot of like crazy editing, like jump cuts or, inner cuts or, whatever. It's more just how they use the editing to build the story. And that's why I gave it a little lower rating than maybe I would have. I feel like the story structure and the way they built the story bumps that up a lot. I do think they did a lot of cool stuff with the editing, but it's not as out there as it could be. I think the story structure is much more interesting. Alright, now we're down to part 3, characters. I think it's really hard to write a character that can appeal to so many different audience members. I think it's really special how they were able to create a character so human, and his experiences are just so grounded. I think that in a lot of romantic comedies, again, and not to say that this is a romantic comedy, but romantic stories. I think in a lot of romantic stories, it's very fantastical. Even if it doesn't end well, it still is very fantastical, and the things that happen are very out there. But I think the characters, especially Tom, and also the story in general, is very grounded. And it gives a very realistic perception of what's going on in the world. I think that it's also very important to show the entire timeline and show how Tom's character truly changes from beginning to end. Because, yes, at the beginning, he has this faith in love, and by the end, he has restored that faith in love, but he loses it at some point. And that's what's so important, because Tom thinks that not being with Summer is the end of the world. But it is so important to show that Tom keeps going, and he keeps living, and he deals with all the stress, and he turns it into something new. A new experience with another girl. And we don't even know if Tom's going to end up with this girl. We don't know if they even end up going out after this. It doesn't tell us. But we see Tom beginning to change his life and change his perspective on romance. And I think it's important to show that these things don't have to end in tragedy. These can be a lesson. And I think, and I'll get to Summer in a minute, but I think Summer is also written so well to be that person who, there are those people who come into your life who are only supposed to be there to teach you a lesson. And they're only supposed to be there for a little bit. And I think it's so important to look your audience in the face and say, hey, this sucks. Obviously, this is devastating. But you will get through it and you will move on. I feel like it's a message we all need to hear. And they do that through the character of Tom so well. I love him so much. I love this movie so much. And it's a very honest portrayal of heartbreak. You're gonna hear me say this every single video I make. I got this off a YouTube video. I don't remember who made it, but it is not originally my idea, but I stick with it so much whenever I write anything. Always be honest. Nobody wants to read or watch a bunch of lies. They want to feel that honesty. They want to feel a sense of genuineness coming from your characters, even if it's a fantastical story. Think about something like The Avengers or, Game of Thrones, where the idea is so fantastical and so out there, the audience already has to suspend belief so much in order to enjoy your content. If you put a bunch of lies or misconceptions or unrealities in how you write your characters, it's going to feel so not genuine. And I think Tom is a perfect example of what it is like to put honesty and genuineness into a character. And that's why he's so relatable, because while he is a fictional character, if you put pieces of yourself into your characters, or pieces of somebody you've met, or whatever, they're going to feel like a real person because it's an honest portrayal. It is something that somebody has gone through, and people are going to relate to it, and people are going to love it because you are putting a sense of genuineness, a sense of relatability into your characters that is so uniquely special. And Tom is a perfect example of somebody doing this because he is so realistic and so relatable. You can tell that whoever wrote his character put a piece of their soul into his character. Okay, let's talk about Summer. So I know I've been ragging on her this video, but I just want to preface again that from an outsider's perspective, it's easy to judge these two characters. It's easy to judge Tom as well. Yes, he can be kind of a whiny bitch, okay? I'll admit it. From an outsider's perspective, it's very easy to judge, but when you're in the position of these characters, it's very different. I think that while Summer is a main character, Tom was fleshed out a lot more because the movie is about Tom and about his character. And it's not necessarily a hit on the writers, it's just how the movie is framed. I think that Summer, because she's not the main focus of the story, her decisions and intentions can seem very erratic or misunderstandable a lot. And I think there is a lot of criticism that can go towards Summer. I think there's a lot of criticism that can go towards Tom. I do think that if she was the main focus rather than Tom, we would be able to side with her a little bit more. It's just the nature of the movie. I'm glad that they chose to stick with Tom. I'm glad that they chose to stick with that story. But I do think that if we dove deep into the mental psyche of Summer, just like we did with Tom, it might all become a little bit more clear. I do want to say that I feel that Summer does lead Tom on a little bit because, like I kind of said earlier, and this is just my personal opinion, if you're Summer and you want to comment down below, obviously we don't need to get in a huge argument about it, like please be nice, but if you want to share your opinion below, and maybe you're on Summer's side for this one, I'm totally down to listen. I do feel like she led him on a little bit. I feel like while she did say she wasn't interested in a relationship, she did a lot of things to make him seem otherwise, and I do think it can be confusing. I do think for Tom there is a sense of entitlement that is there that makes him feel like, maybe not necessarily, I don't want to say that he thinks she should love him because he wants to control her or something. I think he just feels that he wants to feel like he deserves love, especially from someone like Summer, because he thinks that she's just so beautiful and perfect and everything. I also think that while a lot of her erratic character is due to the fact that she's not the main focus of the movie, I also think that she was intended to be that way. And I also think that a lot of the decisions she makes that don't necessarily make sense are for her character. I think she is very confused about who she is and what she wants, and that's why she ends up getting married in the end, even though she said she was never going to get married, because she's not sure what she wants. She's obviously had a lot of bad experiences with romance in the past, and she's not sure that Tom is right for her. I think that she is learning a lot. And again, from an outsider's perspective, it's so easy to judge, and I will, just on a surface level. But if I'm actually going in and analyzing the characters in the story, I can appreciate that Summer has a lot to learn about herself. And she goes through while it's not necessarily shown on screen, she goes through a lot of development throughout the story. And she figures out and realizes what she wants. And I think that is very, in a way, empowering. And I like that character growth for her a lot. And I like that though she wasn't necessarily the main focus, they still chose to give her those hints of character growth. Hi, this is editing me again on a totally different day in a totally different setting. This video is already like way longer than I wanted it to be, so I'm just gonna come here and say something really quickly. But I do want to touch on the fact, and I can't believe I didn't think of this when I was recording, is I want to touch on the fact that the stereotypical gender roles in this movie are swapped between Summer and Tom. I think that generally in a typical romance movie, the woman would be the very hopeless romantic, obsessed with being with the guy, just can't live without him type, and the guy would be the more unsure of himself, you know, very, you know, maybe doesn't want to be in a relationship, maybe afraid of commitment. And I have to appreciate a lot what they did to turn those stereotypes kind of on their head and change how, you know, the dynamic is caused and say, hey, not every woman wants this, not every man wants this. I think that that was very awesome of them to do. Alright, so we'll move on to side characters. There aren't a ton of side characters in this movie. It definitely solely focuses on Summer and Tom, but there are a few who are important. The most important side character, I think, is Tom's sister. And I think she's a really interesting character because she's one of those, obviously, she's a lot younger than him, but she's kind of one of those characters that she's a lot younger, but she has a, you know, very mature sense of self. And I don't want to be like, oh, you're so mature for your age. But, like, she genuinely is very intelligent and has had a lot of experiences that maybe another kid at that age hasn't had. And she helps him a lot, and she gives him some really good advice. Apart from Tom's sister, there's not really anybody else. There's Tom's two friends that he works with, that he has conversations about Summer with, but neither of them really help him that much. They always are just kind of the friends that go like, oh, you're talking about Summer again, blah, blah, blah. Summer doesn't really have any friends. Obviously, when she has that party, she's showing off her engagement ring to people, so she clearly does have friends, but they're not very important to the story at all. Alright, so that'll take us to the rating portion of this section, and although there are a little bit confusing parts of Summer's character, I think all in all, I really enjoy both characters. I can say that I'm a Tom, but I can still appreciate, you know, Summer's effect on the story, like I said. I think they're both really well written. Again, that realism comes back, that realisticness. They really feel human, and I really like them both. I know I haven't touched a lot on acting, which is something that I will touch on in further movie reviews. But I thought for this one it was, you know, better to focus on other things. But obviously, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a fucking legend. Like, he is fucking awesome. And Zooey Deschanel is perfect. Also, love it. I mean, come on. They were both really, really good. I think you need good actors and good writing to work in tandem, and I think they definitely work with this movie. I don't think this movie would have worked if you had really shitty actors, so 9 out of 10 for them. Alright, that brings us to our conclusion, and for our conclusion, I'm going to take you guys over to the conclusion corner. How was that transition? Was it good? Alright, welcome to the conclusion corner. This guy is going to be in these videos for every conclusion. Okay, so here is my final rating of the movie. I have yapped about this movie a lot, but I think it's safe to say I love this movie. It is so good. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love pretty much everything about it. I mean, you can tell by how highly I rated everything. It's really amazing. It's really great. I just love it. I think it's also really refreshing to see a sad ending every once in a while. Because again, and not to say that this is a romantic movie, because this very clearly is not, in a lot of romantic movies, they force the happy conclusion down your throat. And yes, we all like our happy endings, and trust me, in these movie reviews, I will go on my rants about how much I love happy endings. But every once in a while, it is nice to feel that sense of realism and understand that there aren't always happy endings, because it is just life, unfortunately. But it is. And it's really nice to see those exemplified so perfectly on screen like this. I would do a longer conclusion, but genuinely, I have yapped about this movie so much. All I can say is, I loved it. I would give it a 10 out of 10, but I feel a little like I've seen better movies, but not like better, just like, you know what I mean. But 9 out of 10. Really good. Great movie. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it. Even if you have spoilers, I think it's okay. It's like, still go back and watch it. With that, I want to thank everybody for watching. I'm so excited I finally got to make this video. I mean, come on. I've been made this script and slideshow like a year ago, and I'm finally sitting here doing it. And it is, holy shit, it's 1:37 in the morning. I spent so long filming this. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hopefully will be uploading in the future. Obviously, life happens, but I want to do more movie reviews. I've got them right here, and I also want to do some gaming videos, and maybe some more stuff. Obviously, if it wasn't made aware to you by my jokes at the beginning, I did upload some videos in the past. Those have all been taken down. Not my style anymore. We're going to be switching things up. Took a break, but I'm back, and I'm ready, and I'm so excited to be doing more movie reviews for you guys, and I'm so excited to be doing whatever else I decide to do. So if you want to come back and you want to hang out, thank you. And if for some reason you're watching this and you made it to the end, which I don't think anybody will, but thank you so much. I love you, and I really hope that you enjoyed this and you don't disagree with me too much. If you do have your opinions to share, feel free to share them down in the comments, but don't be hateful, don't be mean to me or your fellow audience members. Please be kind, respectful. We can all, talk about this, give our opinions in a nice and productive way. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much. I have a letterbox, and it will be in the description if you want to go and check out my reviews of movies that I've written on there. Not every movie I watch is going to get a full video review like this, so if you want to go check out those written movie reviews that I do for every single movie I watch, if you want to track my favorite movies and you want to see what movies I've watched, I have a whole list of all the movies I'm watching in 2024 in order. You can go look at that right now, so that will be in the description below. Again, thank you so much for watching. I know we only spent a few seconds in the conclusion corner, but you know what? I still loved it, and I hope you loved it too.